This is a question from Pamela Mitchell, viewing at home. If elected, will you continue to work at Westminster, and if not, who will take your place?
Well, thank you very much, Pamela. Yes, I'll continue to work in Westminster, just as Nicola Sturgeon is the SNP leader and First Minister. I've had the good fortune, as I outlined in my speech, that I've been able to hold senior party office, whether as campaigns director or as business convener at the same time as being an MP and being leader of the SNP at Westminster. And if I didn't think I could do both of them, then I wouldn't be putting myself forward. I think I have a track record and understanding of what it is that we need to do in the months and the years ahead. It's something that I am confident I'll be able to do well working together with Nicola Sturgeon. We joined the SNP in the same year. In fact, there's a pretty horrific photograph of both of us doing the rounds, and I think we look like something like a sort of 1980s synth pop band, but I'll stop there. You'll make up your own mind what we look like in the 1980s. Anyway, point is, we've known each other for a long time. We've worked closely together. I know what she's trying to do in the Scottish Government and for the SNP and for the country as a whole, and I think it would be a really good fit having somebody working in the other major centre of SNP representation, which is Westminster, working with our colleagues in the Scottish Parliament, in the Scottish Government, having a leadership team that reflects Scotland. I'm the only declared candidate that is not from urban Central Belt Scotland. I think it's good as a national party, and the clue's in the name, Scottish National Party, that our leadership is a balanced ticket, and that's why I think I have, for the reasons I've outlined, both the ability to do the job, the track record which shows that I've been able to deliver, and the confidence that I'd be able to work and continue to work closely with Nicola Sturgeon in the leadership team of the SNP.
Professor Joe Goldblatt, Edinburgh Central SNP branch. I like what you said about appointing regional organizers. What I would like to know is, how will you grow the party? We have 120,000 plus members. I believe this time next year we should have 200,000 members. What will you do to help us grow this party?
Thank you. Well, frankly, the party's been growing pretty much on its own devices. It's because, and I don't know, how many of you have joined the SNP since the referendum? Well, welcome. I'm sure people have been saying that to you if you've been at branch meetings, constituency meetings, and so on. People joined of their own devices. People were convinced of the case for independence, put their shoulder to the wheel with everybody else, and want to make sure that we get there as quickly as possible. There's a couple of comments I'd make about the membership, though. Yes, I'm in favour of growing the membership, but I think you should be aware that the percentage of political membership in Scotland is probably the highest of any developed democracy in the Western world. So we're doing pretty well for ourselves. I think the challenge for us in the SNP is working with those who are happy to pay their membership fee, happy to get an email in the inbox telling them what the First Ministers are doing or what the SNP is doing. I want to encourage those people who've not yet made it to a branch meeting, or yet made it to a constituency day of action, or have not ever been to a conference, or not ever been to a training event in the SNP, to do that. I think that's the challenge for us. And it's not just for the leadership of the SNP, because I think this is one of the main questions that I want to raise with all of us. I think the leadership has to come from all of us. It's not one person. It's not Nicola Sturgeon saying we must all become more active. It's not Angus Robertson saying we must all become more active. All of us, because I'm guessing that most of us are active in our branches, are active in our constituencies. What is it that we can do to make sure that more of our 120,000 members, most of whom who joined since 2014, become more involved? And I think there are imaginative ways that we can do that, frankly, without spending any money. I remember one of the first things that I did when I joined the SNP and became active in Edinburgh Central all those years ago was my branch, because branches were much smaller. Somebody new comes through the door, people thinking, wow, what do we do with a new member? They said, oh, we'll send them to an organisers course. And in those days there were residential 2-day organisers courses for the SNP. So when you arrived, you were taught, how does this all work? I think for a lot of new members, they turn up and they're surrounded by people who are experienced, who seem to know what they're doing, who seem to be confident about talking to total strangers on a doorstep. That's very daunting for people who've never done that before. So I think one of the main things that we need to do is that we need to understand the SNP from the perspective, in particular, of newer members, make sure we are as welcoming as we can be, and giving you all the opportunity to learn how the SNP works, to get training if you want it, and a range of different activities to become involved in. Not everybody wants to go to a branch meeting to talk about the organisation of the jumble sale, although all of us who've been to an SNP branch meeting know that we all get involved in a discussion about organising the jumble sale. But it's about all of the rest that we are offering to new members. Regional organisers. When I first joined the SNP had a paid organiser who sat in the party's headquarters and made sure that branches were growing and constituencies were developing, making sure that we were doing everything that we could do over the country. I think we have an opportunity to make sure that that's happening now in a party that's grown exponentially. I wouldn't want to be prescriptive about how we would want to organise that. I think we need to speak to people. It shouldn't be a top-down thing. We need to speak to people in branches, in the constituencies, in the different regions of the country to understand what role somebody full-time in an organisational capacity could be doing. Because we shouldn't be replicating what people are doing already. We should be trying to provide value added. Given how exciting I think the next months and years could be, I think that should be mission critical.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
So Alice sent in a question, what do you think the biggest challenges facing the Scottish economy are in the next 18 months?
Brexit. Brexit's the biggest thing that's heading down the track. I don't think we realise quite how testing things are going to become when the Article 50 procedure is initiated, the discussions that then will start between the UK and the European Union. I think at that stage things are going to become very, very concerning economically, which is why I'm so pleased about the leadership that the First Minister has shown. It's been noticed not just in Scotland and the UK. If you have a look at the continental European media, Scotland is, and what's going on in Scotland is very, very well understood. I don't know how many of you saw the survey data that YouGov did with I think I'm right in saying a sample of more than 8,000. That's a big sample to try and understand what the attitudes were of people elsewhere in Europe. An overwhelming majority in the countries surveyed would welcome an independent Scotland if we wanted to remain within the European Union. And I think that's hugely encouraging. I think perhaps it was the case in 2014 that for the first time friends on the continent, not having heard much about Scottish independence and its prospects, didn't get it. I think there is absolutely no doubt that people right across Europe totally get it. The idea that you might be taken out of the largest single market in the world, the social protections that it guarantees us, and we have voted to remain, but we might be taken out by people we never even voted for. That's pretty easy to understand. So the question for us is, what are we going to do about it? And I think the First Minister is doing the right thing by speaking to people, not just people who might be sympathetic to our point of view, but people who really understand how Europe works, about why Europe matters to us in economic and social terms, and try and understand what are our options. And who knows, maybe there are a range of options, and if there are a range, then we'll have to look at them on their merit. I happen to know that there is one way that guarantees your position at the top table in the European Union and being in the European Union, and that's being a member of the European Union in your own right and not leaving it up to somebody else. But we have to explore all the options, and we need to do everything that we can on the basis of what is the most likely option to succeed, to guarantee our place in Europe and the social protections that matter to all of us.
So Lily asked, are you prepared to accept the SNP being named by the Speaker, John Bercow, as the official opposition next term?
I heard this is being actively considered. Many of you are probably aware that we tried to use procedural rules to have the SNP accepted as the official opposition at Westminster, because of course, as we all know, we are already the effective opposition, and we know that the Labour Party is spending most of its time, for whatever reason, fighting within its own party. So they're massively distracted from the job that needs to happen. And as we know, in a democracy, the role of opposition is actually really important, because you need a well-functioning opposition, whether in the Scottish Parliament or Westminster or wherever else, to hold the executive to account. And that's not coming from the Labour Party at Westminster. We're fortunate that the SNP has a functioning team of spokespeople. We're on all committees, And I'd quite like the prospects of being able to ask Theresa May 6 questions every week instead of 2. So yes is the answer.
Claire asked, how would you capture the energy of our new members that they bring?
I think that goes back to my answer to Joe's question about how we work internally in the SNP, asking ourselves, what are we doing to welcome new members? Are we doing everything that we can? And I don't think we should be prescriptive about that. I think we need to speak to new members who are turning up to things, so thank you for being here. But then ask ourselves, are there other newer members who are not turning up for any reason? Now, perhaps it's just some people aren't great at reading emails. Perhaps some people would prefer to be told about things in a newsletter. When I first joined, everything was done by post. So maybe it's about a mixture of ways in which we communicate to our membership, but obviously the postal bill for 120,000 members is a lot more than sending out an email to everybody. But I think we just need to think about the ways in which we communicate with our members. I think incidentally there's a huge role for our elected members, whether they are councillors, whether they're MSPs, MPs, MEPs, have an opportunity to invite new members to new members' events. We've done a couple of those in Murray. They've been hugely successful, and I think that's something that we could roll out as well. I think just introducing people to what the SNP is all about and how it functions. How many of you were at the Hydro, the event that Nicola Sturgeon spoke at? Yeah. Quite a number of you. Well, that was absolutely mobbed, and the majority of you here weren't there. So that shows you, it just shows you that even when you run a huge event involving tens of thousands of people, there are still tens of thousands of SNP members who weren't at an event like that. So I think we just need to get the mix right to let people know that they can become involved in different ways. I think there's another dimension to this, of course, which is in the most recent years. If you think about it, we've had a referendum, and a year before that a parliamentary election, and a year before that another parliamentary election, and a year before that a referendum. We've been in constant campaigning mode, and people have been saying, well, let's not have the branch meet, or let's not have the constituency meet over the summer because we've got a referendum coming up in 2 months or 3 months. We've got to get on, we've got to get out. And I think that has had an impact in how we discuss and how we debate policy. Because frankly, there hasn't been a lot of space for that in many branches or many constituencies, because people have been so busy out speaking to the undecided, speaking to the voters. And I think we need to, and especially again for the newer members, to explain how do we make policy in the SNP. We're a very, very democratic organisation. So people turn up to branch meetings and make proposals. You debate the merits of those proposals. Those then go to a constituency perhaps, or then are suggested for debate at a national council meeting or an annual conference. We need to explain how all these processes work and protect the space in branch meetings, in constituency meetings for people to discuss the policies that they're wanting to go into the SNP's manifesto and our wider policy development, particularly now as we approach this opportunity to protect our place in Europe. We've got big issues that we need to debate and discuss around that, and we need to make sure we do that in a way that involves everybody in the party.
Beyond independence, what's the next most important change we must make?
Beyond independence? Well, I've always felt that independence wasn't the end in itself. I know in the days of yore on our membership cards, when it was a wee card that you could open out, it was our aims were delivering Scottish independence and the furtherance of all Scottish interests. And I've always been of the view that independence is the key to unlock the door to actually change the country that we live in. Not because we're proud about the way everything is now, it's seeing the shortcomings that there are and believing that there is a better Scotland that we can create. And I think most of us would be agreed on what that is. It's a Scotland that's more socially just, that can be more economically successful, and can contribute directly to the wider world. For me, Scottish nationalism has always been outward-facing, outward-looking, and that's why I think these circumstances about where we find ourselves with the potential of being taken out of our European continent, effectively, is so problematic and hurts all of us, because we actually want to see Scotland playing a positive role. It's not all about what's going on in Scotland, it's what is going on elsewhere, and goodness, there are plenty of challenges going on that are impacting us as a wider region and a world that Scotland has something to contribute in. So, beyond independence, it's about what we can use our powers to deliver a more socially just and economically successful country, and an outward-facing country where we play a role in Europe and the wider world.
And as somebody voted against the SNP membership of NATO, and you led a very excellent campaign to be part of NATO. And I wonder if you actually saw this coming, and if you have any insight into, what's going to happen there.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, firstly, there are enough things that are happening in and around Europe that should concern us. If you were living in Crimea, they would concern you. There are other parts of Europe where people are very concerned. Our friends in the Baltic states, in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, who value their independence, are very concerned, having watched what happened in Crimea, having watched what happened in the east of Ukraine. And I think they've got good reason to be worried. And so I think we do have a responsibility to stand with our neighbours who wish to remain independent and not have a large neighbour influence their lives and their countries in ways which happened in previous decades. And whilst that may cause anxiety, and we should always make sure that everything that happened does not escalate a worsening in relations between Russia and the Western world, if I can call it that, I think we do need to be aware that we also have responsibilities. Scotland is in a very important geostrategic location. You only need to look at the map. We have the Iceland Gap to the north, we have the Atlantic to our west, we have the North Sea to our east. So we have a responsibility for our own defence, and I think everybody understands what that means. But we also have a responsibility to work with others to protect their liberty and safeguard that. I must confess, I'm gravely concerned by some of the rhetoric that we've heard in recent weeks in the American presidential elections. And I think it's really important that we also shouldn't lose sight of a radicalising rhetoric in the European continent. And the other issue, and there are connections there, which are causing people to leave war-torn regions like Syria, like Libya, but also people seeking a better life. And it's a huge challenge, and it's not going to go away. So I think the challenge for us as a Northern European country of 5 million is that we have the ambition to play a role, and I think we do, that we're a force for good, and I think we want that. And so whether that's helping refugees, and in Scotland we want to help refugees, but we also want to send the message to our neighbours, our friends in Northern Europe, and yes, our friends in the rest of the UK, that we want stability when it comes to our security as well. And that's why I think we do need to work together. The likes of Denmark and Norway have been able to do it as countries who do not have nuclear weapons based on their shores. So the policy of the Danish government, the policy of the Norwegian government is exactly the same as the policy of the SNP, which is what I proposed to the SNP conference. And if it's good enough for them, I think it would be good enough for us. But I do think that countries of 5 million can be a force for good, and I would hope that if there is a way in which we can help de-escalate relations, we should do that.
George Nielsen, just an ordinary member. Why is the media so against us?
Well, can I say I'm still a member of the National Union of Journalists, and you are too. Good. I would never generalise about the media. I think the overwhelming majority of journalists that I know, whether here or in Westminster or anywhere else, perform a really important role in our democracy, reporting what is happening, showing up shortcomings, whether they are in government or in society, or heaven help us, even in political parties. And I think we should recognise how important that is. I think we just got to be realistic that, notwithstanding the fact that Scotland is changing, there are now media outlets that are pro-independence, and that's a huge step forward, because for those of us who've been active for a while, it's not that long ago that there was literally no support from within the media for the SNP's position. But it's not the job of the media to be cheerleaders for any political party or for any idea. So I choose to value the role that the media play and the overwhelming majority of journalists play. There will always be certain media outlets that will be very vociferous and vocal in their opposition to the SNP. There are many people in Scotland who we have yet not persuaded about the merits of independence or the SNP. So those media outlets are reflecting perhaps the views of that part of society, and they should be reflected too. What I would reflect back to us all, though, is the fact that it is our job to communicate directly, not mediated, but directly with the electorate. And given how persuasive our aim is, and where we want to get to, I'm confident that having made so much progress in the run-up to 2014 and persuading 45% of the electorate that voted on the 18th of September to vote yes to independence, I think we have the opportunity that when we speak to that wider 100% of the Scottish electorate, and directly so, that is what we should be concentrating on, not concentrating on which bits of the media write positive stories about the SNP or independence.
There's another question actually from Pamela, who says, I've been a...
Is this the same Pamela?
Same Pamela, yeah. She's been a party member and an activist for a long time, and she has never heard of the organiser courses. Are they still happening, and if so?
Yeah, I'm not aware that they're happening in the same way. They used to take place in Stirling. I'm looking at Rob Munn, who was there, probably in the same organisers course.
No, later one.
A later one. Are you trying to say you're younger than me?
No, I'm older than you.
The courses that we were both on in the 1980s were organised by the party nationally and took place in Stirling. They were residential courses. They don't take place in the same way. The SNP does offer training, and there's online training. And there's some really, really good tools that we can all access, but not everyone's aware of the fact that these things are out there. So one of the things I'd really like to do is, because many of us do want to take up the opportunity to go to conference, whether we're delegates or not, as members we can go along as visitors, and I'd like to make sure that just as here in Edinburgh you have the official festival and then you have the festival fringe, there's a fringe at SNP conference that involves all kinds of things. I would like to make sure that that fringe offers opportunity for people to go along and have training. How does a party work? How do we organise? How do we make decisions? How do we use social media? I'm new, how does it work? There's a whole range of things that I think that we could be offering new members and encouraging them to come along to SNP conference and learn as one goes along about how all these things happen. So I think it's something that happened in the past in a way that I thought that was very beneficial. There are things that have been happening since in a different way, in a more online way. I think there's a lot of people who actually want to turn up to events and meet fellow SNP members and learn what happens in different parts of the country, what works well there. Maybe we can do that here, and that's something I'd very much like to see take place. Yes, at our annual conference, but why not also at National Council? Why not all at National Assembly? Some people here probably don't. You have never even heard of a thing called National Assembly. It used to be a discussion forum, which I don't think has met with great regularity in recent years. So there are plenty of opportunities to do that on a national level. I don't see why we can't do it on a regional level as well. Why would it not be possible to have regional members meetings so we could bring together everybody from Lothian? We, in this part of the world, all get together to select and rank our candidates for the Scottish Parliament for the Lothian list. Could do it in Glasgow, could do it in Highlands and Islands, could do it in the south of Scotland. So the things we can do nationally and things that we can do at a regional level to bring people in and to add value to the way that we meet already. It's not about having more meetings, because plenty of us have plenty of meetings in our diaries already when you join the SNP. It's about how can we do things in a way that uses time and offers people the different opportunities for training and learning that I think there is a desire for. Thank you, Pamela, for your 2 questions. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming along. I think Nathan's got some exhortations to action, which he's going to share with you, and then happy to meet up and have a chat with you more informally after. So thank you very much for coming along. Thank you.